There's a village in eastern Ukraine called Zolotyi Kolodiaz. By February 2026, it didn't look like much, just rubble, craters, and a few dozen Russian soldiers who'd been hiding in basements for months, cut off, forgotten, living on whatever they could find in destroyed buildings while the war moved around them. They thought they were invisible. They were not, because Azov had been watching them patiently, methodically, documenting every position, every movement, every face that appeared in a doorway for longer than it should have. And then when the picture was complete, they moved. 18 Russian prisoners, 24 hours, a platoon commander, squad leaders, riflemen, all captured before most of them even understood what was happening. The Ukrainian soldier who led the operation had a call sign, Beretta, like the pistol, which, if you think about it, is exactly the kind of energy you bring when your unit has spent a decade perfecting the art of finding people who don't want to be found and then showing up anyway. This is the Azov Brigade in 2026. Not the unit people argued about in 2014. Not the propaganda symbol Russia spent years turning into a cartoon villain. The real one. The operational one. The one that NATO planners fly to study and Russian commanders build contingency plans around. A combined arms machine that has fused drones, robotics, artillery, and small assault teams into something that doesn't really have a proper name in any military doctrine manual. Because it didn't come from a doctrine manual. It came from 12 years of surviving in the hardest corners of a war that never really stopped. But to understand what Azov has built, you have to go back to where it started. And it started with a city on the Sea of Azov that nobody expected to hold. June 2014. Eastern Ukraine is coming apart. Russian-backed separatists had already seized multiple cities in the Donbass. Armed groups were controlling checkpoints and declaring people's republics across Luhansk and Donetsk. The plan, clearly, was momentum. Take enough territory fast enough that Kyiv couldn't respond before the facts on the ground were permanent. Mariupol was next on the list. It sat right on the Sea of Azov. Major port, major industry, and critically, a potential land bridge connecting Russia to Crimea, which Moscow had seized just months earlier. Ukraine, at that moment, did not have a lot of organized forces available. What it did have were volunteers. Among them, a small battalion that had formed only weeks earlier, a few hundred fighters with light vehicles and some captured weapons, operating under Ukraine's Ministry of Internal Affairs. They called themselves Azov, named after the sea outside the city's window. On June 13, 2014, they launched a fast assault into Mariupol. Armored vehicles into the city, small teams building to building, separatist checkpoints overrun in rapid succession. By the end of the day, the city was back under Ukrainian control. The referendum never happened, and a name appeared in military reports for the first time. Now here's where people get confused about Azov, because the early history is genuinely complicated and Russia has spent years deliberately making it more complicated. Yes, some of the original volunteers in 2014 held far-right views. That's documented and nobody serious disputes it. What Russia then did was take that documented history and build an entire propaganda cathedral on top of it, claiming Azov represented the entire Ukrainian government, the entire Ukrainian military, and the entire Ukrainian people, which is roughly like pointing at one controversial unit in the 1970s US Army and claiming it proves America is a fascist state. By 2023, reorganized as the first Azov Corps, it was operating under NATO command standards. Russia still calls it a terrorist organization, the same label they give every Ukrainian unit that keeps embarrassing them. But the real story of what Azov became starts in Mariupol again, the second time, February 2022. Russia's full-scale invasion launches with the assumption, stated out loud by Russian officials, that Kyiv would fall in 3 days. Mariupol would fall in less. A large Russian force pushed toward the city from multiple directions. Artillery began leveling entire neighborhoods. Airstrikes hit industrial zones. Within weeks, the city was encircled. Inside that encirclement, several Ukrainian units, a large number of civilians, and Azov. What followed over the next 86 days is one of the most studied urban defense operations in modern warfare. The Azovstal steel plant became the final redoubt. If you've never seen the place on a map, imagine a small Soviet-era industrial city nested inside a larger city. Thick concrete, massive furnaces, underground tunnels built when Stalin was still signing documents. It wasn't designed as a fortress, but Azov didn't need it designed that way. Small teams moved through service corridors. Snipers controlled access points. Every Russian attempt to storm the complex became a close-quarters nightmare for the attackers. The defenders eventually ran out of supplies. They couldn't run out of determination, but they did run out of ammunition. In May 2022, they surrendered on orders from Kiev. Mariupol fell. And here's the part Russia never quite understood. It didn't matter. Azov had held down a massive Russian force for nearly 3 months. Troops, artillery, aircraft, all of it stuck grinding through one city instead of pushing deeper into Ukraine. From a strategic standpoint, the siege bought time that Ukraine used to stabilize the rest of the front. But there was something else happening while Azovstal burned, because not everyone in Azov was inside that encirclement. Officers and fighters who'd been outside the city when the ring closed were already forming a new unit near Zaporizhzhia. Volunteers were arriving, veterans from other fronts were joining. The skeleton of a rebuilt brigade was taking shape while the siege was still happening. The unit reconstituted before it had even officially been destroyed. That's not normal. That's what happens when an organization has turned survival into institutional habit. By February 2023, Ukraine reorganized several of its elite formations under what it called the offensive guard concept. The idea was straightforward: create large combined arms brigades built specifically for offensive action, not just holding lines. Azov expanded again. Not just a regiment anymore. The 12th Special Forces Brigade Azov, later growing into the full 1st Azov Corps. The structure tells you everything about the philosophy: assault battalions, armor, artillery, air defense, electronic warfare, and at the center of all of it, an unmanned systems battalion with several hundred troops and tens of thousands of drones. That last unit is the nervous system. Everything else is the body, and like any good delivery operation, it runs around the clock. Rain, snow, 3 a.m., doesn't matter. The orders just keep coming. To understand what the Unmanned Systems Battalion actually does on a daily basis, you need to forget everything you think you know about how drones fit into warfare. In the Western military imagination, a drone is a sensor. It flies over a battlefield, sees things, sends data back to a headquarters, and then human commanders decide what to do with that data. The drone assists the fight, humans conduct it. Azov's commander call sign, Kill, described it differently. In his sector, there are areas with absolutely no Ukrainian infantry. 0 soldiers on the front edge. Just drones, sensors, minefields, and artillery cued by unmanned systems. One Azov operator said 12 drone crews with enough airframes can do the work of dozens of infantry, and a section of front line that Russian forces cannot cross without paying an enormous price. That inverts the entire logic of ground combat. Drones aren't assisting the fight anymore. They are the fight. Everything else, the infantry, the tanks, the artillery, waits behind the drone layer and moves only when the air picture is clean. This is the detail that caught NATO's attention, not the individual systems, not the footage of burning Russian vehicles. The structure, the realization that a unit fighting for survival under serious resource constraints had independently arrived at a force design that nobody in a Western war college had formally proposed. So, let's talk about exactly how this works, because the mechanics are where the real magic, or depending on your perspective, the horror, lives. Picture the front line outside Toretsk. This is one of the most pulverized stretches of territory in eastern Ukraine. What used to be a city is now a collection of rubble, flooded basements, and contested ruins where the line between Ukrainian and Russian-held ground shifts by meters at a time. Russian assault groups preparing to move in that sector face a layered problem they cannot fully solve. Layer 1 is overhead surveillance. Small reconnaissance quadcopters run constant loops over Russian staging areas. They're not there to strike, not yet. They're there to build a picture. A truck idles too long in the same spot. A group of soldiers rotates into a trench at 3 a.m. A radio relay antenna flickers on from a position that was empty yesterday. Every observation gets logged. Patterns get identified. The kill doesn't come yet, because the kill without the pattern is just noise. The pattern is the weapon. Layer 2 is the relay architecture. This is the part most coverage misses completely. Russian electronic warfare is real. Powerful jammers push forward to sever control links between Ukrainian operators and their drones. The standard response for most units is to lose drones and pull back. Azov's response was different. When jamming thickened, operators didn't retreat. They changed the question. Some drones climbed high enough to relay signals beyond where jamming coverage typically works. Others switched to fiber optic control, a physical cable running from operator to drone. Completely immune to any radio frequency interference because it doesn't use radio frequency at all. Fragile, difficult to fly, but it broke the fundamental assumption that jamming guaranteed safety. Once Russian commanders couldn't be sure their EW was working, they had to act as if it wasn't. And that uncertainty is expensive. Layer 3 is the strike package itself. Once the surveillance layer has built a complete enough picture, the strike drones activate. Not a swarm, not chaos flooding the sky, measured, precise. An FPV cuts the lead vehicle of an assault column, not a fireball. A clean hit that blocks the road. Another drone finds the communications relay truck. Silence spreads through the Russian radio net. A third watches the flanks for the motorcycle scouts that have replaced trucks in Russian assault doctrine. The column stops. And a stop column inside a 2-kilometer Azov drone envelope is already a failed operation. Now, Russia didn't sit still through all of this. Give them credit. They adapted. Jammers moved forward. Smoke generators went into wider use. Assault formations fragmented. Instead of massed columns that drones hunt easily, Russian units switched to motorcycles, small groups, fast movement through gaps they hoped the drone coverage missed. On paper, clever. In practice, it created a new vulnerability that Azov spotted immediately. Small, fast units moving through terrain leave thermal signatures. They have to. Engines glow at night. Fresh boot prints in cold mud hold heat. A generator meant to stay hidden announces itself to a thermal camera, the way a car alarm announces itself at 3 a.m. in an apartment complex. Azov shifted. Instead of hunting vehicles, the drones started hunting behavior. Repeated use of the same narrow approach routes. Engine heat appearing before dawn in positions that were empty the previous night. The tiny differences in temperature between disturbed soil and undisturbed soil. Speed stopped being an advantage. It became a tell. Because when you're moving fast in the dark, you're also generating more heat, more movement signatures, more of everything that thermal cameras are designed to see. Night stopped being cover, it became evidence. This is also where a new piece of hardware enters the picture. The Seth drone. If you've seen a Shahed 136, the Iranian loitering munition Russia has been raining on Ukrainian cities, you'll recognize the delta wing silhouette. The Seth is Ukraine's answer to its own enemy's weapon. Same general concept, very different execution. Electric motor instead of internal combustion. Quieter, simpler, harder to acoustically detect. Carries 3 to 3.5 kilograms of explosive payload. Operational range out to 50 kilometers. Protected GPS receiver with 8-channel anti-jamming antenna specifically designed for contested electronic environments. The key feature, though, is the targeting system. A reconnaissance drone identifies the target first, locks the coordinates. Then the Seth is cued to that location, acquires the target visually using a contrast detection system, and guides itself in autonomously. The operator picks the target, the drone handles everything after that. Azov's Unmanned Systems Battalion commander described the operational philosophy in an interview. The drone doesn't auto-detect. The human designates what matters. The machine takes care of how to reach it. That division of labor, human judgment for selection, machine precision for execution, is the specific formula that makes this system scalable. You don't need elite pilots for every strike. You need people who understand the battlefield well enough to know what's worth hitting, which after 12 years of fighting in the Donbass, Azov has in considerable supply. Picture a Russian truck driver somewhere outside Toretsk. Early morning, still dark. He's done this route before. Same road, same timing, same logic. Keep moving fast and you become someone else's problem. He doesn't see the reconnaissance drone that picked him up 4 minutes ago. He doesn't know a Seth has already been queued to his coordinates. He doesn't hear anything unusual because there's nothing to hear. Electric motor, no exhaust, no warning. The last thing his dashcam records is the sky. Back in a position 2 kilometers away, the operator marks the hit, logs the timestamp, and cues the next target. The whole sequence took 11 minutes. That's the delivery window. But let's zoom out for a moment, because there's a number that puts all of this in context. By the end of 2025, analysts estimate drones accounted for more than 80% of all confirmed Russian equipment destroyed across the entire Ukrainian front. Not 80% of drone-specific operations, 80% of everything. Tanks, artillery, trucks, command posts, logistics vehicles. 8 out of every 10. According to Ukrainian military reporting, 819,737 video-confirmed hits were logged in 2025. The weapon that most Western militaries still treat as an add-on, a helper, a supplement to real combat power, it is now responsible for the overwhelming majority of enemy losses on the largest land war Europe has seen since 1945. Azov's former chief of staff, Bohdan Krotovich, put it plainly: Ukrainian drones are not a revolution at the level of physics or materials. They are a revolution at the level of application, scaling, and adaptability. You're not reading about a new engine design, you're reading about a new way of organizing violence. Now here's where this stops being just an Azov story, because the unit has a training problem. Not the kind you fix with more money, the kind where you figured out something important and the rest of the world keeps showing up wanting to learn it. Under programs like Operation Interflex, Ukrainian drone operators, including instructors from Azov-affiliated units, began teaching Western militaries directly, not theory, not PowerPoint slides about possible future battlefield environments. Actual frontline knowledge, EW avoidance techniques developed under fire, FPV mission design that came from watching operators lose drones and adjusting in real time, night thermal interpretation skills built by watching Russian units try to hide from cameras that couldn't be fooled. The reaction from NATO observers who attended these sessions was consistent. Not, "This is interesting. This is different." Because the thing about institutional learning inside a combat environment is that it has no patience for ideas that don't survive contact with the enemy. Azov didn't keep a tactic because it was elegant. It kept a tactic because soldiers came back alive when they used it. That filter, applied daily for years, produces something that no training exercise can fully replicate. It produces knowledge that has already been paid for. And the adaptation doesn't stop. April 2026, a Russian strike hits a residential area in Kramatorsk. Fire starts spreading toward neighboring buildings. Ukrainian infantry would normally have to respond, and in a city under occasional drone attack, firefighters approaching a burning structure are a visible target. Azov deployed a ground robotics system instead. The Zmi, a Ukrainian-built logistics and utility robot, repurposed for firefighting. Soldiers moved to shelter whenever Russian drone activity was detected. The robot continued working. Nobody got hurt. That's one story from one day, but it illustrates something about how Azov thinks about the problem of keeping soldiers alive. Not just in direct combat, not just in the drone kill zone. Everywhere on the battlefield, every moment where a human can be replaced by a machine without losing operational effectiveness is a moment where a Ukrainian soldier doesn't get killed. When the war started, this was a philosophy. In 2026, it is standard operating procedure, which is why Ukraine created a dedicated unmanned systems forces branch in 2024, the first of its kind in the world. The orders just keep coming. Back to Zolotyi Kolodiaz. February 2026, 18 Russian soldiers sitting in basements, hiding for months in a village that Ukraine had already decided to clear. Beretta and the Azov International Battalion moved in. Drone operators overhead, watching every exit. Small teams on the ground moving room by room the way the brigade has been moving through contested buildings since 2014. The Russians didn't have a window. They never had a window, because the window had been closed by a surveillance system that never sleeps, operated by a unit that has spent over a decade learning how to make every square meter of contested ground feel like a fishbowl. They were lucky to survive. Azov's statement read. But most of their comrades are still lying in the fields and forests after unsuccessful assaults, which is, in the understated language of operational reporting, the most accurate description of what it currently looks like to fight against this brigade. The lucky ones surrender. The rest show up in drone footage, and somewhere in a basement in Donetsk, another Russian platoon commander is sitting in the dark, listening to the distant mosquito hum above the rubble, hoping very much that the Azov drone overhead is scouting for someone else. It isn't. It's building a picture, and when the picture is complete, Beretta will come.